College of Law Victoria, have a great year.
Yay! Happy New Year from Gippsland Community Legal Service.
Wishing everyone a fantastic 2021 from all of us here at Leo Cousin Centre for Law.
The Sentencing Advisory Council wishes everyone a safe, productive and happy 2021.
Hi from BGCLS, wishing everyone a happy 2021.
Greetings from the Victorian Ombudsman. Here's to fairness and justice in 2021.
Hello from all of us
at Barwon Community Legal Service.
We hope you have a great 2021.
Yay!
Welcoming you all to the new legal year
from Victorian Women Lawyers.
From the legal team at the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. Have a wonderful new year.
And on behalf of the Law Institute of Victoria Young Lawyers,
we so look forward to working with you in 2021.
We love the Legal Laneway breakfast and we're happy that it's happening virtually this year.
Well, good morning everyone and greetings from Wurundjeri land. A very, very warm welcome to our first virtual Legal Laneway breakfast and our 18th breakfast in total. And each year this event is held to mark the opening of the legal year with conviviality and, if not this year, Hardware Lane coffee as usual, then certainly a hell of a lot of warmth as you saw in our opening video. We're also hoping to give you a bit of an insight into the legal year ahead, both from the Victoria Law Foundation's point of view, but from others as well, including our star turn this year, the newly minted Attorney General Jacqueline Symes will join us shortly. One of the very happy consequences of online events is the amazing geographic reach that is possible, and we are thrilled to welcome people with us from right across Victoria and even interstate this morning, so cross-border activity. We have a fantastic lineup, as I mentioned, and a promise to run on time. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to introduce for the first time our new chair, the Honourable Greg Gard, AO RFD. Justice Gard took the reins as chair from the Honourable Hartley Hanson in October last year, and we are delighted that he will lead the VLF at this very important time in our history. Welcome, Justice Gard. Good to see you this morning.
Yes, thanks, Lynn. It's truly wonderful to have over 700 of you join us today from across the legal sector, and I extend the warmest welcome to you. We are proud to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their abiding connection to this land, its waterways and community. The office of the Victoria Law Foundation is on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's my privilege to pay respects to their elders and to all the generations of the Wurundjeri people who have nurtured this land for over 50,000 years and continue to do so today. We believe that acknowledging the past is an essential step in building a better, more equitable future. We recognise the impact of colonisation, its legacy of injustice, and the marginalisation of the Wurundjeri and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Lynn and I are joined today by three special guests: Attorney General Jacqueline Symes MP, Fiona McClay, the Victorian Legal Services Board Chief Executive Officer and Commissioner, and writer and broadcaster Benjamin Law. We look forward to hearing their insights. I also acknowledge some of our guests who are with us today: Sonia Kilkenny, our Cabinet Secretary, Ed O'Donoghue, the Shadow Attorney General, the Chief Magistrate of the Magistrates Court of Victoria, Her Honour Judge Lisa Hannon, the President of the Children's Court of Victoria, His Honour Judge Jack Vandersteen, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Kate Jenkins, the Victorian Ombudsman, Deborah Glass, the Victorian Information Commissioner, Sven Blumel, the Victorian Commissioner for Residential Tenancies, Dr. Heather Holst, the Public Advocate, Colleen Pearce, and the President of the Law Institute of Victoria, Tanya Wolff. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jacqueline Symes, MP. As you are all aware, Jacqueline became the Attorney General in December last year. She began her career in government as an advisor to the then Deputy Premier and Attorney General, Rob Holes. In 2014, she was elected to Parliament as a member for Northern Victoria, an electorate that covers a large swathe of the state, from the South Australian border to past Albury and taking in Bendigo, Macedon and the Yan Yean area. She is also the Minister for Resources and the leader of the government in the Legislative Council. Jacqueline, it's our very great pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for that warm welcome, Lynn and Justice Gard. And it's not intimidating at all, addressing 700 of Victorians' best legal minds, but it is a great honour to join you this morning, even though it's virtual. Of course, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are joining the event today. And I pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging. I want to welcome all the dignitaries, including my parliamentary colleagues and everyone else who has joined us here today. I was very honoured to receive the invitation to today's event and to officially help mark the opening of the 2021 legal year. As you know, this event is normally held in a very packed hardware lane, but the past year has completely upended our lives and the way we work and connect. And these virtual meetings are now the norm. I want to begin by thanking the profession for their extraordinary work providing access to justice to victims and vulnerable people during COVID-19. I want to particularly call out the Law Foundation for bringing the legal community together every year for the past 18 years at this event, and for your tireless work over the past 50 years. The Foundation's contribution to our understanding of the law and access to justice has been immense. It continues to punch above its weight. I'm sure you would agree that the law should exist for everyone. We make the law to keep our community safe and to ensure as much as possible that everyone has opportunities and access to justice. And yet, of course, we know the legal system can be awfully complex for ordinary Victorians. This is where the Law Foundation comes in. To broaden the community's knowledge and understanding of the law and advance continual improvements to Victoria's justice system, I again commend you for this work. As a few of you may be aware, it is the Attorney General portfolio where my personal passion for politics and reform was first ignited. It is this portfolio where I saw firsthand how progressive policy can leave a better legacy, help our most vulnerable, and change the state for the better. I've been blessed with some incredible mentors in this field, none more than the former Attorney General Rob Holes, whose tireless commitment to Labor values set the benchmark for legal reform in this state. Likewise, my most recent predecessor, Jill Hennessy, was unfailingly supportive. Even during a global pandemic, she implemented some crucial, hard-fought and long overdue reforms to our legal system. Underpinning every one of them was a commitment to fairness, to smart justice policies, which indeed make our community safer and empower the most marginalised in our community. The past year has been an enormous test for all of us, as individuals, as a government, and as a society. We know COVID-19 has impacted every institution in Victoria, including our courts. The courts have always maintained their focus on matters involving safety, particularly family violence, and the courts totally changed their operations by scaling up the use of technology to ensure that virtual hearings continue. I want to acknowledge the willingness of the profession to adapt to respond to the undeniable challenges. There are, we know, backlogs which need to be tackled, which is why we as a government supported the court with significant funding in 2020, over $80 million, to ensure that victims and vulnerable people get timely access to justice. In December, the government also announced a justice recovery plan to assist the courts address with backlogs and work through the courts on future reforms. The plan focuses on more matters being resolved outside the court, especially, as I mentioned, family violence matters, safe access to court for all Victorians, such as supporting people with remote hearings, and cases being heard quickly and finalised. I look forward to working with many of you here today on these important issues. I want to take the opportunity to express my gratitude to so many of you who have reached out and offered congratulations on my appointment and the invitation to give this very new attorney a view from the inside. Beyond the immediate challenges of COVID-19, we've still been focused on delivering a safer, fairer Victoria. So despite the upheaval of the past year, we've been able to implement some landmark legal reforms. Tomorrow, the Parliament will debate the government's bill to ban LGBTI conversion practices. Not only are these practices completely ineffective, they are immoral and devastatingly harmful, not to mention a violation of fundamental human rights. There is certainly no evidence whatsoever that sexual orientation can be changed, nor is there any need to. They've been predicated on the belief that LGBTI people are broken and somehow need to be fixed. This has never been true, and any views to the contrary are totally at odds with a modern, inclusive, progressive society. And I will be so immensely proud to ensure our laws reflect this when the bill hopefully passes. Further, the government is progressing important legislation that will abolish the offence of public drunkenness. I know this is especially important to the Aboriginal community, who have been disproportionately affected by these laws and who have been pressing for reform for decades. When it comes to this issue, it's clear that a punitive approach is not the answer. We know that a public health response with clear pathways for first responders and close cooperation between first responders and service providers is paramount. This reform is overdue, it will save lives, and of course, it is smart justice. One of the most important issues of law reform, of course, is how we respond to victims of sexual assault, which remains underreported to the police. In August this year, the Victorian Law Reform Commission will report to me on improving the response of the justice system to sexual offences. We have seen over the past few years a powerful overdue reckoning with the issue of sexual assault and harassment, and a recognition that the issue should be talked about and must be confronted. It's pleasing that we are seeing less and less victim blaming, greater trauma-informed reporting, and outdated attitudes finally changing. But unfortunately, as many of you would recognise, there's more to do. The Law Reforms Commission report will build on previous law reform in this area, and I hope show us new ways to empower victims to come forward and obtain justice. Investing in programs to stamp out family violence will be a key area of focus for me as Attorney General, as indeed it is for our government. The Premier has often said that family violence is our #1 law and order issue. We are rolling out specialist family violence courts across the state, which were a key recommendation of our groundbreaking Royal Commission. These courts provide greater security for women and children experiencing family violence, and they hold perpetrators to account. I'm also very committed to the success of our drug courts, which will be expanding to country areas, including Ballarat and Shepparton, and also to the county court. This is another example of smart justice, which aims to stop the cycle of reoffending. It's about addressing the underlying factors that contribute to offending and support people to get their lives on track and contribute to society. In doing so, it improves community safety and decreases the burden on our courts and correction systems. That's just a snapshot of some of the reforms we have implemented or are currently progressing. There's clearly a bit on, but I'm incredibly humbled and honoured to get on with the job of Attorney General. And I look forward to working closely with you. And of course, I wish you all the best for the year ahead.
Bit of tech drama there is in the transition. Thank you so very much, Attorney, for being with us, and that you're one of our guests in one of your very first engagements in the role is a very significant honour. And we look forward to talking to you further about the role of the foundation, the work that we're doing, and also that you'll join us again next year for the live event in the Laneway. Just before we continue, one little piece of housekeeping. Keep an eye on the chat function on Zoom. We'll be putting up links to relevant materials and resources as we proceed this morning that might be of interest to you. We are delighted that Fiona McClay is with us again this year, Commissioner and CEO, as the Chair said, of the Victorian Legal Services Board and Commission. The VLSB&C are, of course, responsible for registration and oversight of the practicing profession, but there are so many other strings to their bow, including providing very essential funding, including to the VLF, through the Public Purpose Fund. If you've been with us in previous years, you will have heard Fiona talk about their critical work in researching the prevalence of sexual harassment in the sector, and that work continues and is also so vital to ensuring a diverse and inclusive profession. But this year, Fiona, I understand it's all about clients. Good morning.
Thank you, Lynn, and good morning, everybody. I was just reflecting on what a stunning midsummer morning it is and how lovely it would have been to be in person in the Laneway. But next year, as Lynn says. I want to acknowledge that I am in my house on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and pay my respects to their elders and acknowledge the continuing and long connection with land and country of those First Nations peoples. Thank you, Lynn and Justice Guard, for the invitation again to speak briefly to the profession at the breakfast. And Attorney, it's lovely to meet you over Zoom, and I look forward to working with you. I thought I would start briefly with some reflections on what 2020 was like for the legal profession. Hopefully you've all had a break over summer and you're feeling a little bit recharged and starting the process of getting a little bit of perspective on just what happened in that crazy year. People ask me what was it like for the legal profession, and I say, well, I think it was the same as for everybody. It was challenging, it was bewildering, exhausting, sometimes it was sad. But I think it also, on many occasions, brought out the best in people, and including many in the profession. It was good to see that early fears of a catastrophic and swift negative impact on legal practice proved unfounded. Anecdotally, it seems that many firms are actually doing surprisingly well and certainly better than we thought perhaps 10 months ago. While there were cuts to salaries or staffing or reduced hours, in many cases those have been reversed. And we hope that as the wider economy recovers, which the early signs are it seems to be doing, demand for legal services will rise alongside that, and we were starting to see that even as early as late last year. There's no doubt, however, that there are still challenges. A catastrophe like a global pandemic exposes existing fragilities, and I think that's true of the profession. Those who were perhaps finding it difficult before COVID came along may find it harder, and there will be many that face new challenges as the impact of the pandemic becomes clearer. We know too that legacy systems and practices in both the profession and the wider justice sector were exposed by the turmoil of lockdown. And it's also been very hard on the mental health of some in the profession, as it was in the wider community. I think lawyers, like everyone else, are still feeling a little bit fragile. Despite this, though, I see lots to be positive about, and I think the profession has demonstrated that it's very resilient. Sometimes there's discussion, including from me and my office, about a need to sometimes be a bit more innovative, but there's no doubting the resilience of the profession and its adaptability. And it's great to see that in the midst of all that happened last year, lawyers' commitments to their clients and to ensuring access to legal help was undiminished. So what does the year ahead look like? So here are some ideas which, of course, are yet to be tested by data, but let's see how they go. The continuation of the trend to more flexible work practices, working from home, perhaps different mixes of contract and employed lawyers. That was already a bit of a trend, and it's certainly been supercharged. We expect to see that happening. We've seen new practices emerging, younger lawyers starting their own firms, discrete practice areas carving out of larger firms and going out on their own, again, sometimes closer to their home rather than coming into the city to work. This could increase offerings for clients and improve access to justice, although we do need to make sure that we are keeping an eye on our colleagues and making sure that the collegiate support and supervision that is a feature of the profession continues as new practice models emerge. I mentioned questions about mental ill health. We need to keep a really close eye on our colleagues in the profession, be alert for signs of depression and anxiety. Unwell lawyers, it's bad for lawyers and it's bad for clients as well. So we want to make sure that that doesn't develop. And hopefully we'll see continued development of online access to courts and increased access to justice for clients using some of the more flexible platforms and ways of working that have emerged this year. I think there's a few areas where we can see change. Lynn mentioned the client-centred approach. That's a real feature of what we want to focus on at the Board and Commissioner this year. We're wanting to talk with the profession about how to put the client at the centre of legal service delivery. The very important research that the Victoria Law Foundation is developing on the public understanding of law will also assist in that. Linked to this is innovation in legal service delivery, again, with a focus on what is going to be helpful for a client to access legal help. Another area that's really important is addressing the imbalance of women in senior roles in the profession. Lynn mentioned the work that we've done on sexual harassment, and one of the ways of addressing that challenge is to increase women in senior roles. While we have 52% of people with practicing certificates in Victoria are female, we don't see women holding principal practicing certificates anywhere near in the same numbers as men. In fact, only 18% of principal PC holders are women compared to 36% of men. And there is still an imbalance of women at the bar, while the solicitor branch of the profession reflects the general population, 52-48. At the bar, 69% are male. I mentioned sexual harassment. That will remain a focus for us. It's not a short-term goal to try and address that, and we'll be continuing to focus on that this year. And it's really pleasing to see that it's something that the profession, both at a state level and nationally, has picked up, and we're working on with them. And finally, diversity in the profession. We know that the profession doesn't look like the community that it serves. There are not enough lawyers in the profession from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Last year at Practicing Certificate Renewal Time, we collected data on cultural and ethnic diversity of the profession. 78% of lawyers in Victoria were born in Australia. Only 5% claim Chinese ancestry, 3% Indian, and less than 1% Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. There's work to be done there for the profession. But I want to finish on two positive notes. The first one is that the 5th Annual Governance Institute Ethics Index, which came out late last year, revealed that there had been quite a big increase in respondents' views about whether lawyers were somewhat or very ethical. There'd been a large net increase in people viewing lawyers as ethical compared to the year before. Lawyer and commentator Geraldine Jones-Putra hypothesised that perhaps this was due to the community seeing lawyers involved in public interest work, in royal commissions and parliamentary inquiries, starting to see lawyers, as she put it, working towards a united interest rather than in an adversarial setting where we have one being contested against the other. She thought it was a demonstration to the public of how lawyers can behave in a way that promotes justice. I hope this is true and that it continues. I'd just like to leave you with a final thought. I think lawyers, sometimes we can be very good at saying why something can't or shouldn't be done, and that's a very important thing to be saying to a client in many instances. But it's not always the best mindset to bring to a change or a challenge. I think 2020 showed very clearly that many things can be done when they must be done and when the client's needs and not administrative convenience are prioritised. So we have seen virtual access to courts and other legal processes being implemented very swiftly with benefits for clients, for lawyers and the community. I want to encourage you to hang on to that idea that some things that look too hard to be done can in fact be done. Maybe this mindset can help us tackle some of the issues which do seem to be intractable or capable only of incremental change. Sexual harassment, the underrepresented representation of women in senior roles, mental health, the lack of diversity in the profession. Perhaps when you're next faced with a structural or cultural problem that seems intractable, you can draw on what you learned in 2020 and see that change is possible. So I wish you all very well for the year ahead for a safe and productive 2021.
Thank you so much, Fiona. A really useful, I think, summary of some of the challenges before us, but also some of the really outstanding opportunities that there are to improve legal service and support for Victorians and to look after ourselves in the profession as well. Well, after the year we've had, the Legal Laneway Breakfast this year, colloquially known in this office as the LLB, which of course has its own delightful pun attached, it really demanded something new from us. And once again, the silver lining of the online format meant that we could entertain all sorts of options for special guest speakers. And I have to say, I think we have nailed it. As we heard from Fiona, diversity and inclusion is increasingly critical, but it has become a bit of an easy phrase, and there's no underestimating its importance. But the really profound impact that broader diversity and greater inclusion can have on all of us across the profession and across our community. What pains me most about the lack of reflection across senior ranks, particularly of the people we are, is that the opportunities are lost to all of us when some of us are left out. Benjamin Law is the perfect person to give us a perspective this morning on the power of inclusion as we kick off the new year and the new legal year. You know him as a broadcaster, an author, a journalist. He has observed and described the Australian brand of diversity with great honesty and very wry humour, critical in these circumstances, and real impact. You might recall his quarterly essay of a couple of years ago now on the safe schools debacle, how could we forget? And it addresses all sorts of the dimensions in that, inequality, ignorance, power, cultural warfare, and it's sad to say that many of those are still alive and kicking in 2021. As Fiona has observed and as her research shows, we see it too in the legal profession as that research revealed and continues. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us from sunny Sydney this morning. It is so good to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you for such a warm introduction as well. I am blushing, maybe not in places you can see, but I assure you that I am blushing. And it is such a privilege and an honour to be joining all of you here today from where I am, which is Gadigal country, part of the Great Eora Nation. I know that many of you would be on Kulin Nation today, whether it's Wurundjeri country or elsewhere, or maybe on another different Aboriginal nation in the state of Victoria. First Nations people on this continent have been sharing knowledge and stories for tens of thousands of years, together forming the longest continuous human civilization this planet has ever seen. And of course, the first legal structures that human civilization has ever known. So I'm particularly grateful to elders past and present that we can continue sharing stories and knowledge here on what is and what will always be Aboriginal land. Now, for those of you who know a bit of my work, you're probably scratching your head and you're wondering why I'm even addressing you. My full name and title, I guess, is Dr. Benjamin Law, and that leads some people to believe that I have a background in medicine or law. And both of those things are absolute lies. I have backgrounds in neither. But for those of you who might be familiar with my work, you know a bit of what I do. And I'm going to start sharing my screen now in a transition that I will assure you will be absolutely seamless. So just bear with me. Okay, so I am not a lawyer and I'm definitely not a doctor. I cannot save lives and I cannot help people with their legal needs. But sorry, let me just start the subtitles. But what I am is a writer and a storyteller. So you might know my work back in the day from publications like Frankie Magazine, The Monthly, and now I still write for Good Weekend. I'm a broadcaster as well. You might have heard this voice on ABC Radio National when I co-host Stop Everything, or seen me on ABC TV shows too. One of the questions I get often when I tell people that I'm a writer is, why do you write, and why do you write the stories that you do? And I think a lot of those answers are to do with diversity and inclusion, buzzwords that we hear a lot about in all sorts of realms. But I want to unpack that more, because even though we understand those terms now deeply, I think we need to tell stories about why these concepts are important, especially if we are striving to become what the Attorney General said before was a modern, inclusive and progressive society. Some of what I have to talk about is relevant to conversations across the board, not just in arts and media, my realm, but also business and politics, sports, science, and of course, the law. Because what we're having a conversation about really is access, and you cannot have proper access to legal support, and people will have disproportionate participation in stratas of law, which will mean disproportionate access to fairness and justice. Those are the stakes. So for instance, as an Asian Australian, I reflect on the fact that even though 10% of Australians have Asian background, that's roughly proportionate to how many Black Americans there are in the United States. We are so severely underrepresented when it comes to business, law, and that is despite sometimes being overrepresented in the people studying law. Similarly, people who are not minorities, like women, you find, as we heard before from Fiona, that despite 52% of Victorian practicing lawyers being women, so few women are represented in senior positions. Now, in order to understand the stakes of diversity and inclusion, I want to talk about myself, because I think that's a good demonstration of what we're talking about. So my parents, born in Hong Kong, born in China and Malaysia rather, migrated to Hong Kong, married in the 1970s. They moved to Australia. And as they moved to Australia and had us 5 kids, they turned us into the one in 5 Australians who speak languages other than English at home, the one in 4 Australians who were born overseas in the case of my parents, and the one in 2 Australians who have at least one parent born overseas. Even though we look like outsiders, we are very much the Australian story. Another thing that I was very conscious about growing up was being as much as I was an ethnic outsider, I was an outsider in other ways as well. You might be able to tell from this photo, I'm just very flexible, but I was a bit different. And I realized from a young age that I was gay, which was kind of almost a sentence for ostracism growing up in Queensland, the last mainland Australian state to decriminalise homosexuality. But so many of us have photographic evidence of when we were young, proving that it was all there from the start. And even though these twin experiences made me feel like an outsider, later I would write about them in a memoir of my family. My last name's Law. It was about my family. The memoir was called The Family Law. It's a very clever play on words, of course. And I realized that being an outsider gave me kind of special powers, especially as a writer and a storyteller. You see the world from different perspectives. And I think this is something that's so crucial in whatever work that we do, to center marginalized and underrepresented people in the main story and in the main narrative. Whether it's in my journalism, like in my book Geisha, where I traveled throughout the Asian region to look at LGBTIQA+ communities, or elsewhere, that book was reviewed quite well by some Amazon users. 1 star, I hated it. Had to stop reading this book as I didn't like it because I felt the content should have been reported to the police. Or whether it was turning the book, The Family Law, into a TV show that went for 3 seasons on SBS, not just focusing on a Chinese Australian family, but focusing on the coming out experiences of a young teenager, the first such TV show that had ever been shown in Australia. One of the reasons why I think it's so important to tell these stories is they're not just mine to tell. Another reason is I want to make sure that people understand that people like me, people who are outsiders, whether because of their ethnic or cultural background, whether it's because they're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, whether it's because they're a woman, they have a disability, or otherwise, doesn't mean that they don't have merit. And I do find that when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, sometimes the question is asked, well, if we hire outside what we know, can we be guaranteed that we're going to get the best person for the job? And what I would say to that, or what I would ask to that, is the question, does meritocracy actually exist in Australia and in the Australian workplace right now? There's been an ongoing study that's carried out by the ANU, and one of the co-researchers is Andrew Lee, the federal minister from the ACT. And what they found is you can submit the same resume for an entry-level position with exactly the same qualifications, and the number of callbacks that you will receive for that job will differ depending on what kind of family name you have. What they found is if you have a conspicuously Indigenous, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander name, you will have to submit 35% more applications to get the same number of callbacks as someone who's not Indigenous. If you have a conspicuously Chinese surname, you'll have to submit 68% more applications. Middle Eastern, 64% more applications, even Italian. And let's keep in mind that the Italians and the Italian diaspora has been part of Australia for such a long time. You'll have to submit 12% more applications. Also, let's keep in mind that Chinese migration has been happening to this continent for over 200 years now. And often what job recruiters tell applicants from diverse backgrounds is to take on different names on their resume to get the same amount of callbacks, to essentially whiten up. That might be very sobering to hear, because I don't think any of those people reviewing those applications would think of themselves as racist or exclusionary, but that speaks to an unconscious bias that's there in so many industries. What I would say to those in legal professions, and especially gatekeepers, is that unconscious bias training is now available to all Australian lawyers, and it has been so since 2017, and you can find more resources at diversityinlaw.com.au. What I'd also say is strategize about how you go about recruiting diverse workplaces as well. Stephanie Fu, a broadcaster and radio producer in America, says the only way to build diverse talent is to actively recruit it. It's not a passive process. People will often say, I can't find any applicants of color. But aren't we trapped in a catch-22? The question, if you won't apply to our jobs, how can we hire you? Echoes the classic derailing question of, if you won't teach me about race, how can I learn? And it places the burden of furthering diversity on people of color and other minorities instead of the people in power. So what I would encourage is that when we're talking about diversity and inclusion is to think, of course, about race, sexuality, but think beyond, about disability, about age, about geographical regions, about access and equity. This is what the D&I conversation is really about. And also remember that there are great incentives to your workplace when it comes to retention, when it comes to motivation, business growth, problem solving, inclusive and diverse workplaces, ensuring that you have significantly less staff turnover, and happiness as well as a metric for success in the workplace. So creativity, innovation, wider nets for the best talent. And finally, if you're questioning why would you bother with diversity, I would also say that we have a unique position in Australia, given our multiculturalism, given how diverse we are, given we have 1 in 5 Australians with a disability of some sort, to exploit those skills, take advantage of their perspectives. And why wouldn't you when you have those opportunities? This is not a community service exercise. It's not just pure altruism, because when you give diversity to the people, when you enshrine it in the workplace, and I've found this from the arts and media, people want it. In fact, they even win awards. And I really try to think about this whenever I'm committed to any new project, whether it's writing the quarterly essay that we spoke about before, editing an anthology like Growing Up Queer, accessing homeless communities and showcasing their stories in the SBS show Filthy Rich and Homeless, talking about and exploring my own family history, but also the over 200 years of Chinese Australian history in the ABC documentary, Waltzing the Dragon, or in my play, Torch the Place at MTC, which is about mental illness and especially common forms of mental illness in the community as well. And whenever I think about diversity and inclusion and why it's so important, I think about the people coming up behind, and of course, the people we once were, in order to build the fair and equitable society that we're surely all striving towards. Thank you so much.
Benjamin, engaging and insightful as ever, and I think a perfect entree for 2021. And the mood, I think, is universal to try and make things better this year. We've had a really tough 2020, and now the energy is there to make a difference on so many planes. And you've given us some really insightful and useful content to work with. I was fascinated that you mentioned the whole debate around merit, which is really taking off. And for those of you who know him, you'll be thrilled that Michael Sandel, the American academic, has turned his mind to this. He's written a new book called Tyranny of Merit, which I can thoroughly recommend. It's a pretty fierce deconstruction, if you like, of the way in which we understand merit in our current job world and also in our broader communities. So Ben, always brilliant to hear from you. I'm so thrilled that in amongst all that activity, you managed to find time for us between plays and broadcasting and writing. You must have every minute of the day organised like a good lawyer. You are billing at 6-minute intervals.
No, but you've given me a new idea, Lynn.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Don't do that to the ABC. They couldn't afford you. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real thrill and a perfect addition to our 2021 Legal Laneway Breakfast. I'd like to take a few minutes now just to fill you in on the work of the Foundation for 2021. And like all of us, I've been so impressed with what's been achieved under the challenging conditions of the last 12 months. And I'm very pleased to say that we have not missed a beat at the Foundation in delivering on our work in research and education and grant making. And as Fiona mentioned earlier, our major research project, the Public Understanding of Law Survey, is very nearly ready for field work. And in due course, it will deliver some very powerful insights into legal need and how Victorians understand and interact with their legal system. In grants, we've awarded our second round of knowledge grants, specifically targeted at supporting data collection and analysis on particular legal issues. And I commend those projects to you. Keep an eye on our website for developments there. And if you're interested in looking at applying for a grant, be aware, up in shining bright lights, our community grants are now open. They close in March. And if you'd like to speak to our grants manager, Melanie Rigel, about any issues there, then she would be delighted to talk to you and to help you through the application process. We did some pretty fancy footwork in 2020, as so many organisations did, and the courts, as we heard earlier, to deliver programs online. And this year we're taking the good bits out of that silver lining and reshaping some of our activities so that more people can participate. Our short courses on using plain language in the law, which is so critical to any understanding of access to justice, are now available wherever you are. And they are always very heavily subscribed and much appreciated. So I commend those to you as well. The next seminar and workshop on plain language are open for bookings now. We will put a link in the chat, or you can come to our website for further information. And of course, it's time to start thinking about Law Week, which for 2021 will be the week between 17 and 23 May, and it will be here before you know it. So if you're interested in putting an event together for Law Week 2021, get in touch with our events team. Lisa and Helen would be thrilled to talk to you about whatever it is that you're cooking up by way of making the law accessible to all Victorians and giving them an insight into the work that we do. To paraphrase President Biden in his inaugural address, which of course was only a couple of weeks ago now, and what a turning point that was, there's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days you need a hand, and other days we're called to lend a hand. And today, as we do every year, we're supporting a dynamic charity working in justice. And this year, it's Igniting Change. Repeat visitors to the breakfast will know that we usually have a raffle to raise funds for a charity working in important ways in the justice system. But as you can imagine, running an online raffle is tricky. So this year we're asking for your very kind donations instead. Like the VLF, Igniting Change is committed to listening and responding to the experience of people. Igniting Change provides essential support to vulnerable community legal centre clients, prisoners re-entering the community, and people on bridging visas, amongst many other activities. So if you haven't already made a donation, we invite you to do so. There's a link in the chat to facilitate that. And we very much appreciate any contribution that you can make to make a difference in the lives of Victorians who do need a hand. Finally, before we wrap, just about on time, my thanks to all our participants today, to Justice Greg Gard, our Chair, to the Attorney General, Jacqueline Symes MP, to the fabulous Benjamin Law, star of audio and screen, and to Fiona McLeay, also CEO and Commissioner at the VLSB&C. And my very sincere thanks too, on behalf of all of us who have been attendees, to Helen and Lisa and Jackie and Matt in our events and comms team, who have made all of this happen, and the tech held and all was well. They have done a superb job over the last few weeks to pull this event together. And to our sponsor organisations whom you saw at the top in the video. And of course, to the cafes and restaurants of Hardware Lane. You will, many of you have received your coffee vouchers, so please take them up and go back to hospitality. We will support you as best we possibly can. I can tell you my caffeine intake has significantly increased since I returned to the office. I so hope that you've enjoyed our online Legal Laneway breakfast for 2021, and that we can convene again in person over muffins and coffee next year. So thanks again for coming. Have a fine day and a great 2021.
College of Law Victoria, have a great year.
Yay! Happy New Year from Gippsland Community Legal Service.
Wishing everyone a fantastic 2021 from all of us here at Leo Cousin Centre for Law.
The Sentencing Advisory Council wishes everyone a safe, productive and happy 2021.
Hi from BGCLS, wishing everyone a happy 2021.
Greetings from the Victorian Ombudsman. Here's to fairness and justice in 2021.
Hello from all of us
at Barwon Community Legal Service.
We hope you have a great 2021.
Yay!
Welcoming you all to the new legal year
from Victorian Women Lawyers.
From the legal team at the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission. Have a wonderful new year.
And on behalf of the Law Institute of Victoria Young Lawyers,
we so look forward to working with you in 2021.
We love the Legal Laneway breakfast, and we're happy that it's happening virtually this year.
you.